Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is from chapter 349. Chapter 349. Natasha and Pierre, left alone, also began to talk as only a husband and wife can talk. That is, with extraordinary clearness and rapidity, understanding and expressing each other's thoughts in a way contrary to all rules of logic, without premises, deductions, or conclusions, and in a quite peculiar way. Natasha was so used to this kind of talk with her husband that for her it was the surest sign of something being wrong between them if Pierre followed a line of logical reasoning. When he began proving anything, or talking argumentatively and calmly, and she, led on by his example, began to do the same, she knew that they were on the verge of a quarrel. From the moment they were alone, and Natasha came up to him with wide-open, happy eyes, and quickly seizing his head, pressed it to her bosom, saying, "Now you are all mine. Mine, you won't escape." From that moment, this conversation began, contrary to all the laws of logic, and contrary to them because quite different subjects were talked about at one and the same time. This simultaneous discussion of many topics did not prevent a clear understanding, but on the contrary, was the surest sign that they fully understood one another. Just as in a dream, when all is uncertain, unreasoning, and contradictory, except the feeling that guides the dream, so in this intercourse, contrary to all laws of reason, the words themselves were not consecutive and clear, but only the feeling that prompted them. Natasha spoke to Pierre about her brother's life and doings, of how she had suffered and lacked life during his own absence, and of how she was fonder than ever of Mary, and how Mary was in every way better than herself. In saying this, Natasha was sincere in acknowledging Mary's superiority, but at the same time by saying it she made a demand of Pierre that he should, all the same, prefer her to Mary, and to all other women, and that now, especially after having seen so many women in Petersburg, he should tell her so afresh. Pierre, answering Natasha's words, told her how intolerable it had been for him to meet ladies at dinners and balls in Petersburg. "I've quite lost the knack for talking to ladies," he said. "It was simply dull. Besides, I was very busy." Natasha looked intently at him and went on. "Mary is so splendid," she said. "How she understands children. It is as if she saw straight into their souls. Yesterday, for instance, Mitya was naughty." "How like his father he is," Pierre interjected. Natasha knew why he mentioned Mitya's likeness to Nicholas. The recollection of his dispute with his brother-in-law was unpleasant, and he wanted to know what Natasha thought of it. "Nicholas has the weakness of never agreeing with anything not generally accepted. But I understand that you value what opens up a fresh line," said she, repeating words Pierre had once uttered. "No, the chief point is that Nicholas's ideas and discussions are an amusement, almost a pastime," said Pierre. "For instance, he is collecting a library, and has made it a rule not to buy a new book till he has read what he has already bought. Sismondi and Rousseau and Montesquieu," he added with a smile. "You know how much I—" He began to soften down what he had said, but Natasha interrupted him to show that this was unnecessary. "So you say ideas are an amusement to him?" "Yes, and for me, nothing else is serious. All the time in Petersburg, I saw everyone as if in a dream. When I am taken up by an idea, all else is mere amusement." "Ah, I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you met the children," said Natasha. "Which was most delighted? Lisa, I'm sure." Yes, replied Pierre, and went on with what he had on his mind. Nicholas says we ought not to think, but I can't help it. Besides, when I was in Petersburg, I felt, I can say this to you, that the whole affair would go to pieces without me. Everyone was pulling his own way. But I succeeded in uniting them all, and then my idea is so clear and so simple. You see, I don't say that we ought to oppose this and that. We may be mistaken. What I say is, join hands, you who love the right, and let there be but one banner, that of active virtue. Prince Sergei is a fine fellow and clever. Natasha would have had no doubt to the greatness of Pierre's idea, but one thing disconcerted her. Can a man be so important and necessary to society, but also be my husband? How did this happen? She wished to express to him this doubt. Now, who could decide whether he is really cleverer than all the others? She asked herself, and passed in review all those whom Pierre most respected. Judging by what he said, there was no one he had respected so highly as Platon Karatsiev. Do you know what I'm thinking about? She asked. About Platon Karatsiev. Would he have approved of you now, do you think? Pierre was not at all surprised at this question. He understood his wife's line of thought. Platon Karatsiev, he repeated and pondered, evidently sincerely trying to imagine Karatsiev's opinion on the subject. He would not have understood. Yet, perhaps he would. I love you awfully, Natasha suddenly said. Awfully, awfully. No, he would have not have approved, said Pierre, after reflection. What he would have approved of is our family life. He was always so anxious to find seemliness, happiness, and peace in everything, and I should have been proud to let him see us. There now, you talk of my absence, but you wouldn't believe what a special feeling I have for you after a separation. Yes, I should think, Natasha began. No, it's not that. I never leave off loving you, and one couldn't love more, but this is something special. Yes, of course. He did not finish, because their eyes meeting said the rest. What nonsense it is, Natasha suddenly exclaimed, about honeymoons, and that the greatest happiness is at first. On the contrary, now is the best time of all. If only you would not go away. Do you remember how we quarreled? And it is always my fault, always mine. And what we quarreled about, I don't even remember. Always about the same thing, said Pierre with a smile. Jealous. Ah, don't say it. I can't bear it, Natasha cried, and her eyes glittered coldly and vindictively. Did you see her? She added after a pause. No, and if I had, I shouldn't have recognized her. They were silent for a while. Oh, do you know, while you were talking in the study, I was looking at you, Natasha began, evidently anxious to disperse the cloud that had come over them. You are as like him as two peas, like the boy. She meant her little son. Oh, it's time to go to him. The milk's come, but I'm sorry to leave you. They were silent for a few seconds. Then, suddenly turning to one another at the same time, they both began to speak. Pierre began with self-satisfaction and enthusiasm, Natasha with a quiet, happy smile. Having interrupted one another, they both stopped to let the other continue. No, what did you say? Go on, go on. No, you go on. I was talking nonsense, said Natasha. Pierre finished what he had begun. It was the sequel to his complacent reflections on his success in Petersburg. At that moment, it seemed to him that he was chosen to give a new direction to the whole of Russian society, and to the whole world. I only wish to say that ideas that have such great results are always simple ones. My idea is that if vicious people are united and constitute a power, then honest folk must do the same. Now that's simple enough. Yes. And what were you going to say? I? Only nonsense. But all the same. Oh, nothing, only a trifle, said Natasha, smiling still more brightly. I only wanted to tell you about Petya. Today Nurse was coming to take him from me, and he laughed, shut his eyes, and clung to me. I'm sure he thought he was hiding. Awfully sweet. There, now he's crying. Well, goodbye. And she left the room. Meanwhile, downstairs, in young Nicholas Bolkonsky's bedroom, a little lamp was burning as usual. The boy was afraid of the dark, and they could not cure him of it. Dessau slept propped up on 4 pillows, and his Roman nose emitted sounds of rhythmic snoring. Little Nicholas, who had just waked up in a cold perspiration, sat up in bed and gazed before him with wide-open eyes. He had awaked from a terrible dream. He had dreamed that he and Uncle Pierre, wearing helmets such as were depicted in Plutarch, were leading a huge army. The army was made up of white slanting lines that filled the air like the cobwebs that float about in autumn, and which Dessalles called les fils de la Vierge. In front was glory, which is similar to those threads, but rather thicker. He and Pierre were borne along lightly and joyously, nearer and nearer to their goal. Suddenly, the threads that moved them began to slacken and became entangled, and it grew difficult to move. And Uncle Nicholas stood before them in a stern and threatening attitude. "Have you done this?" he said, pointing to some broken sealing wax and pins. "I loved you, but I have orders from Rakiachev and will kill the first of you who moves forward." Little Nicholas turned to look at Pierre, but Pierre was no longer there. In his place was his father, Prince Andrew, and his father had neither shape nor form, but he existed. And when little Nicholas perceived him, he grew faint with love. He felt himself powerless, limp, and formless. His father caressed him and pitied him. But Uncle Nicholas came nearer and nearer to them. Terror seized young Nicholas, and he awoke. "My father," he thought. Though there were two good portraits of Prince Andrew in the house, Nicholas never imagined him in human form. "My father has been with me and caressed me. He approved of me and of Uncle Pierre. Whatever he may tell me, I will do it. Musia Skaliova burned his hand. Why should not the same sort of thing happen to me? I know they want me to learn, and I will learn. But someday I shall have finished learning, and then I will do something. I only pray God that something may happen to me such as never happened to Plutarch's men, and I will act as they did. I will do better. Everyone shall know me, love me, and be delighted with me." And suddenly his bosom heaved with sobs, and he began to cry. "Are you ill?" he heard Dessalles' voice asking. "No," answered Nicholas, and lay back on his pillow. "He is a good and kind man, and I am fond of him," he thought of Dessalles. "But Uncle Pierre, oh, what a wonderful man he is! And my father? Oh, father, father! Yes, I would do something with which even he would be satisfied." All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 349, which is also the last chapter of the first epilogue. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 349. The Word. Shakespeare once wrote that love's month is ever May. That's just the language artist's way of saying that with love everything is forever in bloom, a world of eternal spring. Today we watch love work its fructifying magic in a simple conversation between Natasha and Pierre. Love's unity marries minds, empowering the intuitive and empathetic congress of wife and husband depicted in Natasha and Pierre's conversation. It is the active virtue Pierre speaks of when explaining his political aspirations for Russia. It is Platon Karatsiev's legacy of seeing everything in loveliness, happiness, and peace. Love's jurisdiction touches all. Love settles and strengthens Pierre, who leaves us today a changed man. Gone is the frenzied dope who once tied a bear to a police officer and pushed him into a river, who reckoned himself the holy assassin of Emperor Napoleon, who married the wrong woman and then shot a man over her, who strode confused and out of place into one of European history's greatest battles for no good reason other than why not. Love transforms Natasha, too. We first met her, nearly a year ago now, selfishly seeking attention as she chased the doll into the Rostov dining room. Today, we say goodbye to her as she chases her new doll, Petya, offering him, as she does all now, only selfless service. Yes, we must say goodbye. Today is the last day we'll spend with our beloved characters. Isn't it curious that Tolstoy chooses to end things with Nicholas Bolkonsky, a minor character? I like to think it's because we are young Nicholas. We are semi-strangers to the story. We have listened to its tale. We have learned its lessons. Now we seek to go forth into the world, earnestly applying those lessons, the most important of which is the belief that, daily meditation, love must be free from boundaries. Abdul Baha, Paris Talks. All right, that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 349 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation to PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the description, alongside my Amazon wish list for books and movies. If you decide to support me by purchasing a book or a movie, that'd be fantastic. I'd like it a lot, and we'll set up a Zoom call to discuss that book or that movie. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 350 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.